The first doctor looked at his test results and told him he would be fine. The first doctor was wrong. It was January of 2001. Elon Musk was 29 years old, newly married, and almost nobody in the world knew his name. In less than 2 weeks, he would be lying in intensive care, and the people who loved him would be told he might not leave it. This is the story of the vacation that nearly killed him, the misdiagnosis that sent him home to get worse, and the stranger in a hospital corridor who noticed something everyone else had missed, with, by some accounts, a single day to spare. Because before the rockets, before the factories, before the fortune and the fame, death came looking for Elon Musk. And what it left behind may explain everything that came after. To understand what that hospital bed changed, you have to see the young man who ended up in it. By the year 2000, Elon Musk had already lived a decade at full speed. He had come to North America as a teenager with almost nothing. He had built his first internet company with his brother and sold it before he turned 28. He had poured nearly everything from that sale into a second company, an online bank that would eventually become part of PayPal. In January of 2000, he married Justine Wilson, the Canadian writer he had pursued since their university days. They were young, ambitious, and in a hurry. Two people who believed the future belonged to those who never slowed down. But that autumn, the speed caught up with him. While Elon was on a plane, finally taking a delayed honeymoon, the board of his own company voted to remove him as chief executive. He landed to discover that the thing he had built no longer wanted him at the wheel. He was rich on paper, publicly humbled, and, for the first time in his adult life, not entirely sure what came next. So, at the end of that bruising year, he did something people who knew him found almost unbelievable. He took a real vacation. He and Justine traveled to Brazil and then on to South Africa, the country of his childhood, the place he had left behind as a boy with a suitcase and a plan. It was meant to be rest. It was meant to be healing. Somewhere on that trip, in the warm air of the continent he came from, a mosquito found him. He would not know it for weeks. And by the time anyone understood what was moving through his blood, it would very nearly be too late. The fever started quietly, the way the worst things often do. Back home in California, in January of 2001, Elon began to feel unwell, tired, aching. A young man who had run on 4 hours of sleep for years told himself it was nothing, a flu, a bug, the cost of finally stopping. But it did not pass. It deepened. He went to the doctors, and this is where the story turns cold. The tests were read. A diagnosis was made. He was treated for a viral illness, given care, and sent home to recover, reassured that with rest, he would be fine. Except he was not getting better. He was getting worse, day by day, hour by hour. What no one had caught was this. Elon Musk was carrying falciparum malaria, the deadliest strain of one of the deadliest diseases in human history. The kind that does not simply make you sick, the kind that kills quickly when it is missed. And it had been missed. Justine watched her new husband, the loudest, surest, most unstoppable person she had ever known, grow gray and weak in front of her. The man who could argue anyone under the table could barely cross a room. We can only imagine those nights in that house, a marriage barely a year old, a wife listening to her husband's breathing change, the slow, sickening feeling that something was deeply wrong, and that the people who were supposed to know had somehow not seen it. And here is the part of this story that should stop you for a moment. If nothing had changed, if no one had looked again, this story, and every story the world would later tell about Elon Musk, ends in that January. And think for a moment about how ordinary that decision was, because most of us have made it. We have felt something wrong in our own bodies and told ourselves it could wait. We have had a doctor say the reassuring thing, and we have chosen to believe it, because believing it was easier than the alternative. Elon Musk did not ignore his fever because he was reckless. He ignored it because he was human, because a man who had survived everything else assumed, the way we all quietly assume, that his body would simply keep up with his plans. His body had other plans. What saved his life was not a machine, and it was not money. It was a pair of experienced eyes in the right hallway at the right moment. As Elon's condition collapsed, he was brought back into the medical system, sicker now, far sicker than before. And at the hospital, a doctor with something the earlier tests could not provide, experience, looked at this failing young man and recognized what he was seeing. This physician had encountered malaria cases before. He knew its face. He knew how it hides, and he knew how fast it kills. The right test was run. The answer came back, and it was terrifying. Falciparum malaria, advanced, spreading through his bloodstream at a pace that left almost no room for error. By the account Elon himself would later give, the doctors told him that if the disease had gone undetected even one more day, the treatment might not have been able to save him. One more day. Think about that. Every rocket you have watched rise, every electric car on your street, every headline, every argument, every triumph, and every controversy attached to that name, all of it existed on the far side of a single day in January 2001, balanced on whether one doctor happened to look closely enough. He was rushed into intensive care. Powerful drugs were pushed into his body to fight an enemy that had been given a 2-week head start. And then began the part of the story he almost never talks about: the waiting. 10 days. That is how long Elon Musk lay in intensive care while medicine and malaria fought over his body. For a man like him, it may have been the strangest form of suffering imaginable. All his life, his answer to every problem had been effort. Work harder, think harder, stay up later, push. But you cannot outwork a parasite in your bloodstream. You cannot negotiate with a fever. For 10 days, the most driven man most people had ever met could do absolutely nothing but lie still and let others fight for him. Perhaps that was the first time in his adult life he had ever been truly powerless. Justine stayed close, a newlywed learning the particular loneliness of a hospital chair, the beeping monitors, the tubes, the long nights when the building goes quiet and your thoughts get loud. She was 28 years old, watching machines measure whether her husband would live. The disease tore through him. By the time the fight turned, Elon had lost 45 pounds. Nearly 50 pounds of a young man's body burned away in days. When he finally looked in a mirror, the face looking back had been carved down by something ancient and merciless, a disease older than every empire in history. He survived. Slowly, unevenly, he survived. But those who study his life closely will tell you something quietly remarkable. The man who walked out of that hospital was not quite the same man who had been carried in. Something had been decided in that bed, and the whole world was about to find out what. And somewhere beyond the glass, the people who loved him were living their own version of those 10 days. Justine, his wife of barely a year, had watched the man she married shrink into someone she barely recognized. His family, scattered across 2 continents, waited by telephones for news that changed by the hour. We can only imagine what those conversations sounded like. The careful voices, the sentences that stopped halfway, the particular silence of people who are trying not to say the word they're all thinking. Intensive care is hardest, perhaps, on the people standing outside of it. It took Elon Musk 6 months to fully recover his strength. 6 months of weakness in a body that had never been allowed to be weak. 6 months of climbing back, pound by pound, toward the person he had been. And when it was over, when people asked him about it, he did not give a tearful speech. He gave a joke, one he has repeated for years, always with a smile that never quite reaches all the way. He said, "That's my lesson for taking a vacation. Vacations will kill you." The room always laughs. It is a good line. But sit with it for a moment, the way his family might have. Because underneath the joke is something almost heartbreaking. A 29-year-old man nearly died, and the lesson he chose to carry out of that hospital was not slow down, or hold your people close, or life is fragile. The lesson he carried out was, rest is dangerous. Stopping is dangerous. The one time I stopped, it nearly killed me. We can only imagine what those 10 days really planted in him. No one can see inside another person's fear. But we can see what he did next. And what he did next tells its own story. He never took a real rest again. For years afterward, through everything that followed, he would say he had not taken a proper week off since that illness. The vacation of 2001 became, in a strange way, the last one. Death had come close enough to whisper. And what it whispered, perhaps, was one word: hurry. Look at the calendar of his life, and the pattern is impossible to miss. Within months of leaving that hospital bed, Elon Musk, still thin, still rebuilding, began chasing an idea that everyone around him called insane. He started asking how a private citizen could reach Mars. He flew across the world hunting for rockets. By the middle of 2002, barely a year after intensive care, he had founded SpaceX and begun pouring his fortune into it. Tesla followed soon after. The world would spend the next 20 years asking the same baffled question. Why does this man push so hard? Why the 100-hour weeks, the sleeping on factory floors, the refusal to ever stop? There are many answers, and no one but Elon truly knows them all. But perhaps part of the answer has been hiding in plain sight, in a hospital story most people have never heard. Because a young man who has felt his own body failing, who has been told that a single day stood between him and the end, does not experience time the way the rest of us do. Every morning after that is a morning he almost did not get. Every year is borrowed. Perhaps for him, the great terror was never failure or bankruptcy or ridicule. Perhaps the great terror was simply running out of time before the work was done. The headlines would spend decades explaining him through money, through ego, through ambition. Almost no one reached back to a quiet January in California, to a wife in a hospital chair. to a doctor who looked one day sooner rather than one day later. But some stories shape a life precisely because nobody is watching when they happen. So the next time you see him on a stage, beside a rocket, in a headline that makes you shake your head or nod along, remember the part of the story the cameras never captured. Remember the 29-year-old in intensive care, 45 pounds lighter, learning what it feels like when the body fails and the will cannot fix it. Remember the new bride in the chair beside him. Remember the stranger in the corridor whose experienced eyes bought him one more day, the day that made all the other days possible. Elon Musk is not a simple man to love or to judge. He is human, flawed, difficult, brilliant, wounded, and driven by engines most of us will never fully see. But this much seems true. The man the world calls unstoppable once came within a single day of stopping forever. And he has spent every year since running as if he remembers it. Death came close enough to whisper, and what it whispered was, "Hurry." Maybe that explains the rockets. Maybe it explains the restlessness, the exhaustion, the refusal to be still. Or maybe it is only one thread in a much larger tapestry. Either way, you now know a chapter of his life that most of the world has never heard. A chapter with no cameras, no applause, and no headlines. Just a hospital room, a frightened family, and a young man deciding somewhere in the silence that he would never waste another day. Stories like this one are why this channel exists. The quiet chapters that history skips on its way to the famous ones. If tonight's story stayed with you, consider subscribing to Elon Musk Untold Legacy, so the next hidden chapter finds its way to you. Until then, be gentle with your days. He learned the hard way how few of them are promised.